I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Nana Akwe and Mercy Muroki. On your TV, online and on digital radio. Now, we're here all the way through till midday with the show full of the big stories of the day, opinion and lots of discussion.
Yes, we are. Make sure you get in touch with your views on anything we're discussing this morning. GB Views at gbnews.uk. We'll get to those throughout the show as usual, but first, let's give you the latest news.
A very good morning. It's 2 minutes past 10. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date here on GB News. The Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove says people in the North and the Midlands have been overlooked and undervalued by politicians for years. Well, the government is now publishing its election pledge plans to level up the country with the aim of reducing the gap between poor and rich areas. The policy includes 12 national missions, such as improving pay, investing in education, and a devolution of powers from Westminster. Michael Gove told GB News the government is listening to voters.
In the 2016 Brexit referendum, one of the reasons why so many people voted leave is they wanted to shake up SW1 and say, look, whatever you're obsessed about in your bubble, however successful you and your friends are, there are people out here in the country who have not shared in that success. And we want a government that is as focused on Wolverhampton as it is on Westminster. And we've got that message, and I think the whole political system is getting that message now as well.
Well, Shadow Levelling Up Minister Alex Norris has criticised the policy, accusing the government of using recycled pots of money.
The idea that there's an awful lot more money coming through the system, I don't think stands up to scrutiny. Again, we're seeing these same kind of broad promises with very little detail, and as I say, no new money sitting behind them. And I think we'll see exactly as much action as we've seen over the last 12 years, which is none whatsoever.
Russia has accused the West of deliberately trying to lure it into war with Ukraine. In his first public comments in almost 6 weeks, the Russian President Vladimir Putin said the US was ignoring Moscow's security concerns about NATO forces in Europe. Russia has mobilised around 100,000 troops to the border with Ukraine. Western countries say any invasion will incur sanctions. A charity and a union representing Border Force officers are seeking a High Court injunction to prevent migrant boats from being pushed back towards France. Lawyers for the Public and Commercial Services Union and Care for Calais are going to argue that the Home Office should suspend the policy because it contravenes international law. The union says it's trying to protect Border Force members and avoid harming refugees who try to reach the UK. Shoppers have been hit by the highest price rises since 2012. British Retail Consortium data shows shop inflation almost doubled over the past month. It monitored price changes for 500 commonly bought items, with furniture and flooring seeing exceptionally high demand. Households across Britain could receive £200 a rebate off their energy bill. MPs are reportedly going to announce a multi-billion-pound loan programme to energy suppliers across the country, according to The Times. Well, the companies will be asked to pass on the money to households to help offset the hike in bills set to hit consumers in 2 months. Well, the regulator Ofgem's due to announce the new energy price cap tomorrow. The Treasury is being urged to reduce VAT on public electric car charging. Drivers who can't charge their cars at home and instead use public points are paying 4 times more tax in electricity. Well, a new campaign called Fair Charge says the policy is unfair. Fair Charge co-founder Quentin Wilson told GB News that government policies need to make electric cars appealing for everyone.
I'm lobbying the Treasury to say, look, this is great for us, for society, for public health, to create highly skilled, highly paid new jobs in this high-tech industry that we can drive forward. And the government needs to just help us, incentivise us. I'm not asking necessarily for subsidies, but just make it easy for private enterprise to build this new network of charging stations that we can all use.
Researchers have found that magnetised metal seeds can be guided through the brain and then heated to destroy tumours. Successful tests on mice suggest the technique could be used on humans. The seeds are tiny alloy balls, 2 millimetres in size. Researchers believe this technique could reduce recovery times and increase patient survival rates. The Duchess of Cambridge says she's thrilled to become patron of the Rugby Football Union and Rugby Football League. She is the first member of the royal family to take over one of Prince Harry's former roles. Kensington Palace released a video to mark the new patronages. Kate's affiliation with English rugby now puts her, though, in direct competition with her husband, who's patron of the Welsh Rugby Union. You are up to date here on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the point.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muroki, and Nana Akweer on your TV, radio and online. We're here with you until midday as usual, bringing you the day's top stories, our opinions as well, and most importantly, your views. So here's what to expect.
Now, the Metropolitan Police are once again facing serious accusations of misconduct after it was revealed in an official report that serving officers exchanged messages about hitting and raping women, the deaths of black babies and the Holocaust. Now, we'll be joined by a former Met Detective Chief Superintendent a little later on to find out if their Met really is rotten to the core.
Yes, and it's been revealed that the Department of Health and Social Care made a loss of billions, over 8 billion in fact, on a £12 billion purchase of PPE during the pandemic. This comes as we're all asked to give the government more, of course, of our money to prop up the NHS and social care. I'm sure you have some views about that. We'll be analysing the government's use of your money very shortly.
And levelling up, that government phrase that we've all heard so much about, but few politicians can actually define. Well, perhaps some progress now. The government has finally unveiled its white paper, which sets out its plans to rejuvenate industry and transportation, reduce crime and improve living conditions for those in poverty. We'll have a go at making levelling up clearer with our expert guest.
Yes, that's all coming up and much more as well across the programme. And make sure you get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, Nana gives her views on the net zero agenda.
I'm sorry, but I'm not buying this net zero baloney. I mean, hands up if you've got an electric car. I think not. At 44k a pop, with minerals mined probably by slaves, paid a pittance for the privilege from mostly third world countries who are selling out to be like the failing West, pursuing a pointless goal to stop or slow down a planet from its natural evolution of climate change. Don't make me laugh. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to work out that the infrastructure for electric cars simply isn't there. And to create it could prove, in my eyes, to be even more damaging to the environment. Instead of pursuing less disruptive routes like maybe biodiesel, which can be made from recycled vegetable oils, crops and algae with a byproduct of crude glycerol, which in turn has numerous uses, biofuels burn cleaner than gasoline, resulting in fewer greenhouse gas emissions, are fully biodegradable and could be used in our current engines. Yes, biodiesel has its drawbacks, like depending on how it's made, it could prove costly to the environment. But in my view, these are fewer than the electric route. They want us to scrap our current vehicles, part with our cash for a costly electric dream. I mean, have you seen the price of electricity these days? Did you know that the VAT on charging points is at 20%, the same as VAT on the fuel at the pumps, yet VAT on domestic electricity is just 5%. And it's got 45 minutes to charge these things in any case. I suppose a load of charging cafes will appear. The Starbucks and Costa Fortunes of this world must be rubbing their hands with glee. Even in that nonsense conference that they had in Edinburgh, COP26, the thing they all flew to in private jets, which was a joke, by the way, The clue being in the name, there's been 26 of these damn things. Even there, they were unable to cope with their own attempt at electric vehicles to ferry the delegates. And they expect us, all of us, how many million of us, to give it a whirl. In my view, it's unachievable and actually counterproductive. They're going round and round in circles of hypocrisy, offsetting our carbon to places around the world like China, who sensibly refuse to participate in this ridiculous goal, thereby making it even more pointless. And we are to be the bastions of this delusion. Lord Frost, the former Brexit negotiator, left because of the government's policy to raise taxes, COVID restrictions, and has called for a clear-out of the neo-socialists, green fanatics and woke crowd in Downing Street. To think we left the red tape of the EU to create our very own intricate framework of so-called green regulations. Boris, I'll let you off Partygate because I don't believe in bringing a Prime Minister down for this when others in the role have behaved just as badly and stayed. A global pandemic is not an easy thing to deal with, especially after skillfully securing Brexit. However, I believe the opportunities afforded to us by it will dissipate if we continue to pursue this farcical, unachievable, nonsensical goal. Whilst I agree that if you can balance the greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere with the ones being removed by it, this is probably a good thing. There appear to be some sneaky ways, however, of getting round the calculation. Forget Partygate. Net zero will take this government down.
Well, why don't you just tell us what you really think?
That was it.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is something we've been speaking about, me and Patrick, on this show, and I'm sure you've spoken about this so many times on your show. How the public didn't exactly give this a thumbs up, didn't they? They didn't give this the green light. The government is pressing ahead with this entire net zero agenda at what I think is... it's going to come at a cost, and the people who are going to pay that cost disproportionately are poorer people. Look, I'm not a climate change denier, but I do have major concerns around how the whole debate is done. I have major concerns about the price we're being asked to pay, given that even if we completely reduce our emissions to zero, we're still only 1% of global emissions. What we're doing in the grand scheme it doesn't really change anything unless those big players, like China, for example, make changes. So I would scrap the net zero by 2050 personally. I would scrap some of the other initiatives the government is handling, but I don't think they will, sadly.
Well, I think we need to have... I'm not a climate change denier. I believe climate changes and it will naturally evolve and change in any case. I don't know how much of a hand we have in slowing it down. I mean, I've said it's pretty much like, if the moon is falling down, we all think if we stand underneath it, hold our hands up and blow, we can actually catch it. I mean, that's how I equate our efforts into trying to stop this thing. But I just think that really the conversation needs to be had about what are the most efficient and best ways of doing this if we really are serious about it, rather than palming us all off with the very, very expensive electric idea, which to me is a bit of a pipe dream, frankly, and I don't see... It's unachievable. Have you got an electric car?
No.
Could you charge an electric car near your house?
Well,
is it
that's
possible?
the thing. That's the other thing. People who live in tower blocks, for example, how are they supposed... If they're expected to get a car, poorer people, what's expected to happen for them? But hey, look, let us know what you think about all of that. How do you feel about net zero, especially, given how much of your money the government wants to keep taking?
Well, they keep doing it. They're doing it on everything, really.
And wasting as well. We'll be talking about government wasting your money later, as well on other things. But for now, let's talk to our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, for more on this.
Yeah, morning, Mercy. Morning, Nana. Actually, I wanted to pick up on what you were saying, Nana, about the fact that the infrastructure for electric vehicles isn't in place at the moment. This is according to the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders. They reckon the UK needs £1.9 million on-street charging points, and at the moment it's around 40,000 charging points spread around the UK. Now, to put that in, it's going to cost around £17.6 billion. For 2021-22, the government only pledged £20 million towards grants for on-street charging points. So in order to get to where you want to be, to have the infrastructure in place and to make the vehicles themselves much more affordable for the average person, the government's going to have to put in a hell of a lot of money, especially if he wants to hit its targets by 2030, which is when new sales of diesel and petrol cars are going to be stopped. So there's still a very long way to go, and there's also an onus on the manufacturers as well. There are Tesla supercharging points behind me. Guy earlier pulled up in an Audi electric vehicle. He couldn't get the charging cable to the car and the interface wouldn't work. He told me that if his wife's driving the car and she's going to charge it up, then she needs to call him to then activate the account so that he can then she can then charge the car. Now he said he contacted Audi about that. They said it's a software issue. Can't be that difficult to figure it out, but it just goes to show that there's a responsibility on the manufacturers and the systems to homogenise, to make it easier, and then the government's got to put a lot more money in to get the infrastructure in place. So, there's still a long way to go before all of us are able to make this journey from petrol and diesel cars to electric.
Paul, have you got an electric car? Have you got one? An electric car?
I'm driving a hybrid at the moment, but no, not a completely electric car, no.
That's
Interesting. Well, thank you for that, Paul. Now, moving on to a big story, really. A police watchdog has found evidence of, quote, disgraceful bullying, misogyny, discrimination and sexual harassment within the Metropolitan Police, especially those based at Charing Cross Police Station. The Independent Office for Police Conduct found messages exchanged between officers that were racist, violent and highly sexualised, with references to rape and spiking women.
I mean, this is awful, isn't it? I mean, one WhatsApp group user was nicknamed McRapison because of his reputation for, quote, harassing women. Another group member talked of killing black children and chloroforming women that they fancied. Kevin Hurley was Surrey Police and Crime Commissioner between November 2012 and May 2016. He's also served in the Metropolitan Police, reaching the rank of Detective Chief Superintendent. I mean, Kevin, thank you for joining us. This is just disgusting, isn't it? I mean, look, we've had the whole Sarah Everard incident, of course, and this Wayne Couzens was nicknamed the rapist, and people knew of this. What is going on?
Well, first off, of course, it's absolutely appalling. Let's get a sense of perspective here. This was in 2016 through to 2018 and was a small little team left without any supervision, any guidance or the correct ethos. Utterly appalling, doesn't surprise me. And to be quite honest, in answer to your question, what is going on? What is going on is the impact of police reform brought in by Theresa May and the current government. And the reason I say that is the result of the various cuts, the changes and reductions in training means that supervision, management, leadership levels are far reduced. These people who did this were part of a team of 120 people with one inspector for all of them and a sergeant on average between 20 if sergeants at work. That means you're going to get some rogues, you're going to get some yobs, and in my experience, they do exist, and I've had to sort them out for not too dissimilar behaviour. What concerns me is this is just, if you like, another boil on an overall problem, which is called the changes of police reform. If you introduce people who can become a sergeant in 18 months under the current scheme, be an inspector instantly, and then put them in charge of large groups of people in a very challenging, dynamic job, they really don't know what they're dealing with. Now, that does not excuse these dreadful conversations between two of them who were quite rightly sacked and one, in fact, prosecuted at court. But the bottom line on it is, if we are going to continue to reduce the offering for potential police officers, reduce the training, reduce the guidance, reduce the coaching and support and supervision, this kind of stuff is still going to go on. So I'm very, very disappointed to see it. It doesn't surprise me. I used to clamp down hard on if I came across the odd incident of this, even when I was in as a chief super in charge of a chunk of West London. But it's a product of what you get when you bring young men and some young women together with the culture that young men have, but then empower them as police officers are without proper guidance, supervision, coaching, and even some checks as to how they're performing. If you haven't got people there and these people are allowed to frankly run loose, it's going to happen.
Well, the problem, though, that I see from all of this is that the very people that the police are trying to encourage to become officers and so on and so forth to join the force seem to be the ones who are the victims of this in terms of within the force itself. So it's women, it's the minorities who've been invited to join the force. It's those people. And you pointed out that it doesn't surprise you, but to me, I'm horrified and shocked that this would even be a possibility that this could be something that's prevalent within the force of this country. And do you see a way, because you've talked about things that you've seen that have gone wrong, which is why you think we've been drawn down this path, but what can we specifically do then to try and fix this? Because it seems like it is rotten to the core.
Well, it's not prevalent. You know, we are talking about a small team that comes back to 2016 who were relatively unsupervised and not kind. You know, let's get it in perspective. Sarah Cousins was shocking. One person there, but in fact, an elite team of detectives were commended by a judge who said it was the best and fastest inquiry for murder he'd seen in 30 years. So the police service in this country are doing very well still. And as someone who's trained police in Afghanistan and Iraq and Africa, I've seen it everywhere. It is not rotten to the core, but there is a problem, and it's called people interfering and changing the way it was always done. You could not be a sergeant in the Metropolitan Police till you'd been in for 5 years, or an inspector till you'd been in for 10. That meant you're a wise old head. You're an inspector when you're in your late 30s, and you would not allow any of this jobbishness. Similarly, because they don't go through the inculcation of a 20-week residential course like they once did, they don't embrace the value, standards and ethos that we want like they did before.
Kevin, we do have to unfortunately leave it there, but we do really appreciate you joining us this morning to give us your insight on that. Kevin Hurley, Surrey Police and Crime Commissioner between 2012 and 2017, and also did serve in the Metropolitan Police. Well, after the break, we discuss how you, the taxpayer, will face a £10 billion bill for a series of mistakes from the government, the Health Department. Join us for that after the weather.
Hello again. There will be some bright spells, even some sunshine, mainly to the east of higher ground, but most places are cloudy today, and it will be damp in the northwest, western Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England, because a warm front is moving through. It's pushing northeast, and within this warm front, areas of cloud and rain arrive from the Atlantic, but also relatively mild air coming in from the west. Having said that, it is fairly chilly for the Northern Isles ahead of the warm front, and there'll be a few showers at first here before more persistent rain and drizzle arrives later, and it stays damp for western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, as well as northwest England and North Wales, particularly over higher ground. But there will be cloud breaks to the east of Wales, across southeast England and eastern England, and where we get some cloud breaks, 13 or even 14 Celsius is possible, so really quite mild for the time of year. And then this cloudy and damp zone spreads across the whole of the country overnight. So the cloud breaks tending to fill in somewhat, and because of the cloud and an increased breeze, well, it's going to be frost-free for everyone. Temperatures most places staying up at 7 or 8 Celsius. A mild start then to Thursday, but a dull and dreary start for many. Some persistent rain around western hills and coasts. But again, some cloud breaks will develop, especially for the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast, and feeling pleasant enough where that happens. But the breeze will pick up through the day. Gales in the north and west of Scotland, and some heavy rain arriving here later as temperatures drop away significantly behind this area of rain. This is a cold front, and it's going to spread its way southeastwards on Thursday night. Snow above 300 metres for Scotland as the cold front pushes through, and also for the Pennines, and some really quite lively winds associated with it, so gales around coasts and hills. Once that front clears through, colder air for Friday, mixture of sunny spells and showers, turning cloudy with rain in the north on Saturday.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview, channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:26 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Muroki, and Nana Akweer here on GB News, live on your TV, radio and online.
Now, the official Department of Health and Social Care accounts have revealed that £8.7 billion of taxpayers' money spent on PPE during the pandemic was wasted. And by the way, this was out of a total spend of £12.1 billion on PPE.
As well, the government's auditors said that the government was, quote, not able to manage adequately some of the elevated risks of the pandemic, resulting in significant losses for the taxpayer.
Now, Duncan Simpson is the research director at the Taxpayers Alliance, and he joins us now. OK, so, Duncan, a lot of the PPE that was bought was unusable in any case. I'm kind of looking at this and thinking the government are clearly wasting a lot of our money, but they're expecting to increase our taxes. What other ways could they perhaps be getting the money to cover the social care budget rather than from us?
That's right. I mean, the accounts are pretty shocking, frankly. So the auditor, the National Audit Office, obviously went through them, signed off the accounts. They gave what's called a qualified audit opinion, which basically means that from the auditor's perspective, they don't have enough information, or they don't think the department has enough information to provide to them to give reasonable assurance. And that means specifically but there was very bad record keeping in terms of the inventory that the department was buying, fraud risk as well. There was a much heightened fraud risk. And that led to, as you were just laying out, a huge impairment charge in the accounts. So that's particularly shocking. Obviously, there are different methods which the government is going to approach this to actually increase revenue for the NHS. Obviously, we've got the national insurance hike coming into effect in April, and then that's being expanded to even more people April the following year as well. So that's pretty alarming. I mean, there are numerous instances of waste which we come across in the NHS day after day, basically. And I think really focusing on that to alleviate some of the concerns which ministers might have for healthcare spending overall should be the focus right away, rather than going through this situation once again.
And I read these figures, I think it was yesterday when it first emerged that these figures were in that annual account. And I was really disappointed, shocked, appalled. I mean, I know government wastes lots of money. That's why I'm a small state kind of girl. I think we should try and have a small state as possible. But against the backdrop of being asked to pay more, I think it's even adding insult to injury. Are there any mechanisms through which people can actually hold the government to account on what the government is doing with their money? Or are we just expected to shut up and put up with it?
Well, I think two things should happen immediately. I think, first of all, the permanent secretary, Sir Chris Wormold, who runs the department, should be fired this morning. He is ultimately responsible to Parliament as the accounting officer for that department, and obviously it's massive. Obviously, the budget was increased enormously for obvious reasons to deal with COVID. Second, as well, the Secretary of State for the accounts during that period, so 2020 to 2021. Obviously, that was Matt Hancock. He should be hauled before Parliament as soon as possible and explain himself to either the Health Committee or the Public Accounts Committee to really get to why this has gone wrong. Now, Parliament obviously dipped into this now and again. We still haven't had that COVID inquiry to see exactly why these kind of decisions happened, or rather didn't happen, as to why this money was spent so badly. But Parliament really needs to get on with that, and people who were ultimately responsible for this need to be fired. So that's some of the first things that should be happening.
Firing them, we've still spent the money. Was it 673 million on PPE that was unusable, 750 million on items that expired before they were used, 2.6 billion on items not usable within the NHS, and 4.7 billion accounted for by falling market prices. I mean, look, this is loads of things that we appear to have, the government appear to have wasted our money on. Could we not put it to the government? Because I don't understand why they're not pursuing these people who they've falsely given these loans to. Why they're not pursuing them, and also pursuing some of the companies like Amazon and those who've benefited specifically because we were indoors from this pandemic. Can we not be getting some sort of windfall tax to alleviate the burden on the taxpayers?
Well, I'd be slightly nervous about a windfall tax. I mean, obviously, as you say, there are certain companies which would have done very well out of the pandemic. Necessarily, Amazon comes to mind. Obviously, a lot of food delivery companies and so forth. But necessarily, that's just a change in demand. That's a change in people's spending patterns, rather, because necessarily, legally, we had to stay inside. So I think sort of punishing companies who were there and available to provide services which were essential or otherwise is probably not the best route for that. So I'd be slightly nervous. I mean, one policy that you could introduce, for example, and we called for this a couple of years back, is modifying the Fraud Act. So effectively, that means much more stringent custodial sentences for those who have abused taxpayers' money. Now, that could be suppliers of PPE, for example, who've given faulty equipment. On the, as you're alluding to as well, the job retention scheme, so the furlough scheme, in other words, we know that there are many thousands of employers or sort of phantom employers who took a lot of this cash who absolutely didn't need that. So I think the prison time for people who have really abused the system, that needs to be hiked up by the government, I think.
Well, Duncan, thank you so much for talking us through that story. I'm sure it's one that won't go away. Well, I hope it won't. I'm sure the government wants it to go away.
Well, I don't want to pay for this new thing. I don't see why we should. I want to get them to give us our money back first.
Absolutely. Duncan Simpson there was the research director at the Taxpayers Alliance. Well, keep letting us know what you think in our inbox, gbviews at gbnews.uk. We will get to those very shortly, but after the break, a woman who was found guilty of fabricating a gang rape in Cyprus has had the case against her thrown out. We'll be talking about that very shortly, but before that, a look at this morning's news.
Good morning, it's 10:33. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove, says people in the North and Midlands have been overlooked and undervalued by politicians for years. The government's now publishing its election pledge plans to level up the country with the aim of reducing the gap between poor and rich areas. Well, Labour's criticised the policy, accusing the government of using recycled pots of money. Russia's called on the US to turn its back on provocative actions and stop whipping up tensions in the European continent. Ahead of a planned call with Boris Johnson, President Vladimir Putin accused the West of trying to lure it into war with Ukraine and ignoring Moscow's security concerns. Russia has mobilised more than 100,000 troops on its border with Ukraine, and Western countries say any invasion will incur sanctions. A charity and a union representing Border Force officers are seeking a High Court injunction to prevent migrant boats from being pushed back towards France. Lawyers for the Public and Commercial Services Union and Care for Calais will argue the Home Office should suspend the policy because it contravenes international law. Shoppers have been hit by the highest price rises since 2012. British Retail Consortium data shows shop inflation almost doubled over the past month, from 0.8% in December to 1.5% in January. It monitored price changes for 500 commonly bought items, with things like furniture and flooring seeing exceptionally high demand. The Treasury is being urged to reduce VAT on public electric car charging. Drivers who can't charge their cars at home and then use public points pay 4 times more tax. A new campaign called Fair Charge says the policy's unfair. You're up to date here on GB News. Don't forget about on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. I'll keep you up to date throughout the day. We've got a short break though now, and then we'll be back to the point.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
It's fast approaching, 38 minutes after 10 o'clock. This is To The Point with Mercy Muroki and me, Nana Akweer, on GB News, live on TV, online and on digital radio.
Yes, now Boris Johnson is promising to break the link between what he calls geography and destiny with a series of wide-ranging national missions, from improving public transport to ensuring access to 5G broadband.
Now, the promise to level up forgotten and deprived communities was a key theme of his 2019 general election campaign, which saw Tories make huge gains in Labour's previously impregnable red wall heartlands.
Yes, well, Wolverhampton is one of the cities set to benefit from the government's programme, and our West Midlands reporter Balvinder Sidhu is there for us now. Good morning, Balvinder. How have residents taken the news?
Good morning, ladies. Yes, I am in Wolverhampton, which is one of the areas expected to benefit from this levelling up announcement due later this morning. Well, people here, first of all, I've been asking them what exactly does levelling up mean to them, and they didn't quite understand the term, but they did say, there are many areas of improvement that are needed in this city.
Recession kind of hit this place and we never really got out of it, as you can see evidently by the high street. I think there's been a lot of migration from across the country and immigration as well, but it's been a lot of poor people, and there's been no affluence and there's been no money, not particularly skilled people. I used to work in recruitment for a number of years, and Wolverhampton's notorious for being a black spot in terms of skilled.
It's like a third world country at the moment, yeah. But no one's got any money, and all the shops are closing, it's a ghost town. So he's been here quite a few times, Boris, so he knows exactly what it is like.
It's not a lot of shops for young people, and there's actually quite a lot of young population in Wolverhampton. You know, you got football fans coming in all the time, like, you know, they might want to go shopping. People go to the university. They actually all travel. Many of them are from Birmingham or London. Like, you know, none of them even want to stay in Wolverhampton. They want to go straight back. They don't even want to, like, whether staying here.
Housing here is not good at all. You do have to wait quite a lot, even in the private market, or say if you want to go the government, still it's very hard to find, and especially with the prices nowadays as well, especially when you don't actually have a job, then it just makes everything much harder.
You know, the thing I find with Wolverhampton, any approach from out of the area into Wolverhampton is not aesthetically pleasing. It needs attraction, you know, some colour, some modernity.
Outlying areas, improve the housing estates, encourage house building, property development and so forth, and encourage younger generation to come to Wolverhampton. There's got to be some attraction for them to come to Wolverhampton.
It's a run-down place. It's always been a run-down place. What keeps it going is just central government.
Lots of people here mentioned housing, as you just heard there, and money is going to be made available from April to develop housing communities with access to leisure facilities and greener areas, just to make the place more attractive to live and work. But there are 12 missions that the Housing Secretary Michael Gove is expected to detail later, and it covers a wide range of areas that they want to work on, including broadband, primary school attainment in literacy and numeracy, improving that for children, these selective sixth forms in 55 areas across the country to help disadvantaged children achieve academic excellence. There's a huge range of things. It's quite an ambitious plan. It's a long-term plan. There's been lots of criticism of it, to say that it's, you know, just a rehash of an old plan. The government are not planning to invest any new money into this. I mean, how this is going to materialise remains to be seen, but it is a key part of the government's manifesto. When Boris was elected, he promised that, you know, he would get Brexit done, and he would also level up the country. He would close the gap between the north and the south. So this is all much needed investment. It's something that takes us away from Partygate at the moment, but how this comes to be remains to be seen.
Well, Balvinder, thank you for bringing us that and the views of the people in Wolverhampton as well.
Well, joining us now is Imran Hussain, who's Director of Policy and Campaigns for Action for Children, who have called for levelling up to address three key areas of child poverty: early intervention and school readiness. Talk us through this, Imran.
Hi there. Yeah, I mean, we're really looking forward to the white paper. It's overdue. Not just it was expected to be out in November. I think it's overdue for 10 years. We've not really had a plan like this from government for about 10 years. And the children Action for Children works with are the people in the country who are most in need of a plan for levelling up, a helpful levelling up. So what we're saying is, you look at three ways of measuring levelling up: child poverty, early help, school readiness. If we had action on those three, then we could do a lot for the children who are being left behind. And, you know, it sounds like the government is going to have a mission which is around literacy and making sure children leave primary school literate and numerate, and that's a good thing. I think I'd be looking for help and action around school readiness. So, you know, if kids are going to do well at primary school, they need to be school ready. And I'm not sure I've seen anything so far which hints that the government is doing anything in that area as part of this plan. Hopefully, we'll see something later today. I think we also care about vulnerable children, so children at risk of going into the care system. Those children, the best way of helping them, the best way of giving value to taxpayer, if you like, in terms of interventions, is making sure they get early help so their problems don't escalate. So these children need crisis help, like going to the care system. And over the years, funding there and early help has been cut. So we'd be looking for a reversal of that. And I think the really big worry is about poverty. So there is a mission there about living standards. But that doesn't talk about families at low income, and that's worrying, because if we don't sort out child poverty, then we're not going to have levelling up for children. And if we don't have that, then it will get in the way of of a lot of the other missions. So housing, health are all driven. Many of their problems in housing and health are driven by poverty. So that's one of the things we will be looking at really carefully. Is the government, is levelling up paper going to tackle high and rising child poverty?
Do you trust the government to be able to deal with all those problems that you've outlined there? Because, latest figures show around 200,000 children are actually starting secondary school, not even being able to read at the age they're expected to be at. The government, this government doesn't seem to be getting a lot of things right. I think it's fair to say we've just been talking about wastage, how they've wasted billions of pounds on PPE. Trust in this government is quite low. So don't you think it's quite ambitious of you to expect the government to deal with these things, given their record?
Well, we're hopeful. I think what a good thing is that the government is setting out clearly. It's a plan. It's setting out, these are our 12 priorities, and broadly, this is how we're going to do it. I think that's today. What we're looking for in the months and the years ahead are serious plans, clarity of focus from ministers, and the right investment to get these things done. So, absolutely, today the white paper is a document. What we're looking for is a framework to take things forward, and we're looking for results. And this stuff matters. If we don't get it right for these children, then the damage done to their life chances, to their childhoods, will be real. But that damage to them individually has a big impact to our society and to our economy.
What's your opinion on the role of the welfare state in all of this? Because these are children, the children you're talking about are children who are suffering now. And investment is great, yes, of course, and hiring more teachers and better readiness for school is great. But those are long-term things. What can we do to help children who are in absolute poverty right now, today?
So fundamentally, we need the acceptance that the current poverty approach isn't really working. There's too many children in poverty, and all the projections are that child poverty is going to rise fairly significantly over the next few years. So once you have that acceptance, and then we need a new poverty plan, and that poverty plan has to be broad. We have to look at how can we promote people moving into work. How do we promote paid progression? How do we help parents with the costs of childcare? Also need to look at high housing costs. What can we do about that? As well as things like the social security system and the level of benefits. Is it enough to keep families out of poverty? Is it enough to help working families stay out of poverty? I mean, 3/4 of poor children in this country live in working families. So we've got to do something about that.
Yes, I think we all agree something has to be done. We can leave it there. Imran Hussain, thank you for joining us, Director of Policy and Campaigns for Action for Children.
Now we move on to this, because it's an interesting statistic that the number of couples filing for divorce fell by 5% last year, according to figures released by the Office of National Statistics. Research says that over 100,000 divorces were granted, a drop of 4.5% compared to the numbers in 2019.
Yes, well, some say this is because the pandemic brought couples closer as they battled lockdown, elderly care and homeschooling together. But divorce lawyers say figures don't tell the full story.
Let's go to Graham Nichols, the director of Affinity Gospel Churches in Partnership. Graham, what do you think of this report of divorce numbers apparently falling?
Yeah, I think that it's obviously true factually, but I think it's also true sort of other people's analysis of it, that it's probably a little bit of a calm before the storm, that there was for a short time the sort of camaraderie and couples pulling together for that period, but probably it's not going to overall change the picture, that sadly a lot of couples do get divorced, and I don't think it's going to mark some sort of change in that. As a Christian leader, obviously I think marriage is great, and I think committing to lifelong marriage is great, but I'm not sort of taking heart particularly from these figures. I think there are things that point another direction. For example, that it's been well reported increases in domestic violence and so on. happening during the pandemic. So I don't think it would have necessarily marked a massive change. Obviously, you know, in some families it has been great for couples to be together, and they have really enjoyed it. So I'm not negative about it. I'm just not sure it marks a massive change.
And do you think that it's a good thing that the way the figures of divorce are going, or in your eyes, do you think that couples should you'd like to see way more marriages?
I think I would love to see way more marriages, but I suppose what I'd like to see more than anything is way more committed marriages. I think marriage now has become a social event that marks some sort of part of a relationship at kind of any stage when you can afford it or feel a bit more committed than perhaps you did. Whereas I would love marriage to be an actual lifelong commitment that is kind of entered to at the right time for the right reasons and as a lifelong contract. And I think when that works well, it's a beautiful thing and it's a great thing and it's great for society and it's great for families as well. So I would love that, and I think the ease with which divorce is going to be allowed after this April with the kind of no fault divorce, which I kind of understand, you know, all the kind of recriminations and avoiding all of that. I can understand it at one level, but it does make it extremely easy. You know, like the sort of, you know, termination of a mobile phone contract. You didn't like it after a year or something. It doesn't really give that kind of seriousness and lifelong commitment that I think marriage is all about.
I'm nosy. Are you married? Have you ever been married?
You can ask that, of course. Yeah, I've been married such a long time. I know I don't look it, but I've been married since 1985 to Caroline, and we're very happy. We've got 3 kids and some grandkids, and it's going okay. Although I'm sure I did something wrong today.
Oh, we probably have, Graham. Listen, it's lovely to talk to you. Yeah, nobody will have me. I've still never been married. No one wants me, Graham.
I'm sure that's not true. Well, given all the views we've been getting about how lovely you look and how glowing you are, I don't think I quite agree with that.
You've been married?
Have I ever been married? No. I plan to be one day, I suppose. If somebody will have me.
The same.
I feel sorry for them.
Yeah, me too, actually.
Yeah, good luck to them. That's what I say in advance. Lots of your views getting into us. Thank you. Let's start with you. You did your monologue on net zero. You're not impressed at all. I think it is euphemistic way to put it with the net zero agenda. D says, I agree with you, Nana. This net zero needs to be scrapped. How are people supposed to be able to afford all these changes? We would have to have our electric supply upgraded at a huge cost, not to mention buying an electric car, then the heat pump, which in our 18th century house would be useless. I think this policy is a big vote loser. Lots of views agreeing with that.
The 18th century house sounds lovely, doesn't it? Well, there's another one here from Peter. Peter says, Nana Aquia is spot on with her views on the green agenda. I support the environment, but want sensible strategies to help the environment, not these obsessive, ill-thought-out initiatives. I will not vote for any party or continue with the Conservative green agenda.
Yeah, that's true. We spoke about as well the massive waste that the government, the Department for Health and Social Care, in their annual accounts, they've revealed that based on 12.1 billion of investment into PPE, 8.7 billion was essentially wasted. Graham says, are we really surprised that so much money has been wasted on initiatives when initiatives were being demanded and hosed around so quickly? People were being paid not to work. There is more to come out of the woodwork yet. So he thinks more wastage will be revealed in time, which I completely agree with.
Yeah, of course. And even if you look at the amount of waste, I mean, even in bed blocking, they waste almost 10 million a day on 17,000 people who should really be out of the hospital system and in a different structure, and they're well people. Well, we talked also about the police and obviously the awful misogyny that's quite clear that is, I think, to the core of many elements of the force. And we spoke to one ex-commissioner officer, and we've got Carol has got in touch and said, I'm with you, Nana. How can he say he's not surprised that one sentence speaks 1,000 words, that it's happening on a regular basis, disgusting behaviour. Police need to reset, kill little black babies. Wow, just wow. This is one of the comments that was within this WhatsApp chat that was amongst this force. Make a woman black out if they fancied them, basically giving them chlorophyll, which is awful. Please tell me this world has gone insane in the brain. I'm living a nightmare.
I do wonder whether these things have always existed and now, you know, be given social media, given phones and screenshots, maybe it's actually good that, you know, we're able to expose them.
For sure.
Somebody, Pat here, says, what a stupid excuse to say police cuts have played a part in the mindset of these men. Peter agrees. He's saying, claiming that it's the government reductions which have caused these despicable message is itself disgusting. Saying that black children should be killed is not acceptable under any circumstances. But for balance, Mark does agree with Kevin Hurley, who the policeman we had on earlier. He says he's bang on. The police recruitment process and the fast tracking for promotion of recruits is pitiful. There are many recruits who are not fit to be police officers and are rushed through to recruitment processes. Mark's a retired police officer as well, so he definitely
But how
knows what
they
he's
even
talking
got
about.
in the first place, though, I mean, you know, like if you go for a job, you'd expect better research on the person that you're employing, especially with the likes of social media available, and it doesn't seem like they're doing those things.
Yeah.
It just seems a bit silly, really.
Yeah, I think the problem is, though, I mean, nobody ever turns up to a job interview and says, oh, by the way, you know, in secret, I'm a massive misogynist and a racist and I make, you know, sexist jokes. And
But you can see on a lot of the social media, I mean, some of them you could have done a little bit of research on social media and discovered those things quite quickly.
Yeah, I think we can all agree, I think, that vetting needs to be massively looked at, doesn't it, when it comes to the police? That's what I think the last year or so has very much revealed to us. But keep your views coming into us, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Coming up, we speak to a barrister about the Supreme Court in Cyprus who have cleared a British woman of false gang rape allegations. That's all going to come up soon and much more. But first, let's give you the weather.
Hello again. There will be some bright spells, even some sunshine, mainly to the east of higher ground, but most places are cloudy today, and it will be damp in the northwest, western Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England. Because a warm front is moving through, it's pushing northeast, and within this warm front, areas of cloud and rain arrive from the Atlantic, but also relatively mild air coming in from the west. Having said that, it is fairly chilly for the Northern Isles ahead of the warm front, and there'll be a few showers at first here before more persistent rain and drizzle arrives later, and it stays damp for western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, as well as northwest England and North Wales, particularly over higher ground. But there will be cloud breaks to the east of Wales, across southeast England and eastern England, and where we get some cloud breaks, 13 or even 14 Celsius is possible, so really quite mild for the time of year. And then this cloudy and damp zone spreads across the whole of the country overnight. So the cloud breaks tending to fill in somewhat, and because of the cloud and an increased breeze, well, it's going to be frost-free for everyone. Temperatures most places staying up at 7 or 8 Celsius. A mild start then to Thursday, but a dull and dreary start for many. Some persistent rain around western hills and coasts. But again, some cloud breaks will develop, especially for the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast, and feeling pleasant enough where that happens. But the breeze will pick up through the day. Gales in the north and west of Scotland, and some heavy rain arriving here later as temperatures drop away significantly behind this area of rain. This is a cold front, and it's going to spread its way southeastwards on Thursday night. Snow above 300 metres for Scotland as the cold front pushes through, and also for the Pennines, and some really quite lively winds associated with it, so gales around coasts and hills. Once that front clears through, colder air for Friday, mixture of sunny spells and showers, turning cloudy with rain in the north on Saturday.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muroki, and Nana Akua today on TV and radio, as well as online, and we're here all the way through until midday with a show full of today's big stories and lots of discussion as well.
So make sure you get in touch with your views. As usual, GB Views at gbnews.uk. We'll also be getting loads of those throughout the show, but first it's time to get your latest news.
A very good morning. It is 11 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. Now, the Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove says people in the North and Midlands have been overlooked and undervalued by politicians for years. The government's now publishing its election pledge plans to level up the country, aiming to reduce the gap between poor and rich areas. The policy includes 12 national missions, like improving pay, investing in education, and a devolution of powers from Westminster. Well, Michael Gove told GB News the government is listening to voters.
In the 2016 Brexit referendum, one of the reasons why so many people voted leave is they wanted to shake up SW1 and say, look, whatever you're obsessed about in your bubble, however successful you and your friends are, there are people out here in the country who have not shared in that success. And we want a government that is as focused on Wolverhampton as it is on Westminster. And we've got that message, and I think the whole political system is getting that message now as well.
Shadow Levelling Up Minister Alex Norris has criticised the policy, accusing the government of using recycled pots of money.
The idea that there's an awful lot more money coming through the system, I don't think stands up to scrutiny. Again, we're seeing these same kind of broad promises with very little detail, and as I say, no new money sitting behind them. And I think we'll see exactly as much action as we've seen over the last 12 years, which is none whatsoever.
In other news now, Manchester United footballer Mason Greenwood has been released on bail pending further investigation. The 20-year-old was first arrested on Sunday on suspicion of rape and assault of a young woman after social media images and videos were posted online. On Tuesday, he was further arrested on suspicion of sexual assault and threats to kill. The Home Secretary says there's been a failure of leadership in some parts of the Metropolitan Police. Priti Patel was speaking after the Independent Office for Police Conduct found evidence of bullying, racism and misogyny in the force. She told the Home Affairs Committee there are problems within the culture of the Met.
We're not seeing one-off incidences. I think we should just be quite clear about that. We are not seeing one-off incidences. It's not isolated. We have seen now too many times, too many instances where in policing we just see the most appalling behaviours, the most appalling conduct. I also think it shows a failure of leadership in some quarters.
Russia has told the US to stop whipping up tensions in Europe. Ahead of a planned call with Boris Johnson this afternoon, President Vladimir Putin accused the West of trying to lure it into war with Ukraine. Russia has mobilised more than 100,000 troops at its border with Ukraine over recent weeks. Western countries say any invasion will incur heavy sanctions. A charity and a union representing Border Force officers, they're seeking a High Court injunction to prevent migrant boats from being pushed back towards France. Lawyers for the Public and Commercial Services Union and Care for Calais will argue the Home Office should suspend the policy because it contravenes international law. The union says it's trying to protect Border Force members and avoid harming refugees who try to reach the UK. Shoppers have been hit by the highest price rises since 2012. British Retail Consortium data shows shop inflation almost doubled over the past month. It monitored price changes for 500 commonly bought items, with things like furniture and flooring seeing exceptionally high demand. The Treasury is being urged to reduce VAT on public electric car charging. Drivers who can't charge their cars at home and instead use public points pay 4 times more tax for electricity. A new campaign called Fair Charge says the policy's unfair. Well, co-founder Quentin Wilson told GBNews the government policies need to make electric cars appealing for everyone.
I'm lobbying the Treasury to say, look, this is great for us, for society, for public health, to create highly skilled, highly paid new jobs in this high-tech industry that we can drive forward. And the government needs to just help us, incentivise us. I'm not asking necessarily for subsidies, but just make it easy for private enterprise to build this new network of charging stations that we can all use.
Thousands of pieces of memorabilia made to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee have been significantly discounted after producers failed to spot a mistake. A Chinese manufacturer made more than 10,000 teacups, mugs and plates with Jubilee written as Jubilee. They've been picked up to be sold by the Dorset retailer Wholesale Clearance UK, which has suggested potential customers could take up plate spinning as a hobby. You are up to date now on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now back to the point.
Good morning. It's fast approaching. It's 6 minutes after 11. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Nana Akwe and Mercy Muroki, on your TV, online and on digital radio. We're here with you until midday, bringing you up to date with the day's top stories, our opinions and, more importantly, your views as well. Now, here's what's coming up.
Yes, we'll be joined by Conservative MP Daniel Kaczynski to discuss the future of the Prime Minister. Looking ahead to Prime Minister's questions a bit later, he faces further criticism about Partygate and his performance in Parliament on Monday. Don't miss that.
Are there extreme failures in the way child sexual exploitation is being tackled? New figures suggest that this is the case. We'll be talking to Marilyn Horse, who's campaigning against child sex abuse, to find out why so little is being done to solve this horrific issue.
Yes, and with Russia and Ukraine's tension on a knife edge, can the US or the UK find a diplomatic solution, or is Putin intent on invasion? Our home and security editor, Mark White, will be giving us the latest.
We have all of that coming up and much more across the programme, and you can get in touch with your views as usual, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But first, Mercy gives her views on sentences for killers.
Now, you wouldn't think it looking at the news agenda over the last couple of weeks, but there are actually other things going on in the country besides cake, ambushes and parties. Can you believe it? And one of those things that is particularly important to me, and I can imagine millions of others across the country, are the rates of child neglect, child abuse and child killings we are currently experiencing. Dig through all the newspapers pages this morning and any other day this week on Partygate, and you'll find that new analysis by the NSPCC has found that police made an average of 669 child protection referrals to social services every single day in 2020-2021. A total of nearly 245,000 across the year. That's an 8% increase from the previous year. You may have also seen the news that in the 12 months up to June 2021, there was a 23% increase in police recorded cases of child cruelty compared to the previous year. Now, the sad reality is that this will come as no surprise to those of us who, whilst understanding the need to protect the public's health during the pandemic, were also warning over and over about the consequences of forcing vulnerable people to be trapped in their homes. Homes which for too many children were, simply put, death traps. Now, I've spoken on many occasions on this programme, as recently as last week, in fact, about how social services are failing too many children. But I want to talk about another related issue, which I, for the life of me, cannot get my head around. Last Friday, we heard the news that a London couple had been jailed after causing their 8-week-old baby, Amina Faye, to die a horrible death with more than 60 broken bones. That's right, more than 60 broken bones, 41 fractures to her ribs and 24 fractures to her limbs. No words can even begin to articulate this level of evil. But this is the part that really gets to me. The couple, Benjamin O'Shea and Naomi Johnson, who were found guilty, were jailed for 8.5 years and 7 years, respectively. By the way, the 16-month-old Star Hobson, who was brutally murdered by her stepmom, was also given a measly sentence of 8 years, the mother of Star Hobson. So why such pitiful sentences? Well, that's because the maximum sentence you can get for the offence of, quote, causing or allowing a child to suffer serious physical harm is 10 years. The maximum jail sentence for the offence of causing or allowing a child to die, 14 years. That's according to the Sentencing Council for England and Wales, who determine maximum sentences judges can hand down. Now, it has to be noted that the police say that in the case of Amina Faye, murder charges couldn't be brought against the parents because no cause of death was ever established. But nonetheless, there are serious questions to be answered here. An 8-week-old baby turns up dead with over 60 broken bones, and the best we can do is give those proven to be responsible a few years behind bars. That's despite medical experts concluding the baby's fractures were caused on several occasions and were not accidental. That's despite the fact Amina Faye's parents refused to take her to the doctor on an occasion when she was coughing up blood. That's despite the fact the judge deemed Amina Faye's injuries, and I quote, deliberate and vicious, and, again I quote, could have only been caused by a brutal attack. Despite all of that, the best we can do as a justice system was 8 measly years. Really? I think there's a major disparity here between what the British public deem reasonable and just and what Parliament, which sets the framework for sentencing, and the Sentencing Council, which produces sentencing guidelines to use, think is reasonable and just. Look, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know all the particularities of this case, and I don't claim to know the ins and outs of the criminal justice system. But I do know this. Our justice system repeatedly fails victims. It's ineffective, too many sentences feel morally unjustifiable, and I'm deeply ashamed to live in a country where child killers walk free within years.
Well, I mean, I echo those sentiments 100%. I only wish I could have said it as eloquently as you. Frankly, I'd just execute them. I mean, look, I just think it's disgraceful. I think that there is... So they're trying to create this thing, this Arthur's Law, where, of course, if somebody is convicted of murdering a child, then they'd serve a whole of life term. But I don't see why. There is actually the availability to do that anyway, and we just don't appear to be doing it.
Yeah.
You know, if you harm a child and it results in that child's death, and it's clear that it's quite deliberate, then I can't see any... I just can't understand how there's any leeway for that. You know, if it's proven that you've done it on purpose. I mean, Arthur Lavinia, he's awful. Poor little Mike, he was 6 years old, 130 bruises. The social services, you've mentioned them, they failed. The schools even put the case to the police, as did the grandparent, as did the parents. But yet nothing really happened, and this poor child died. I mean, it's disgusting.
I think it's a real anomaly, this law where this sentence, the maximum sentence, 10 years for causing or allowing a child to be harmed and 14 years for causing or allowing the death of a child. That's a complete anomaly, I feel, because in this case, you have a child, 8-week-old, 60 broken bones. Everybody's saying, look, we know it wasn't accidental. This happened over a long period of time, well, long, 8 weeks of the child's life. This could have only happened by a deliberate and brutal attack on this child. And yet somehow our justice system and what's available in terms of sentencing and what's available in terms of the charges that can be brought, it's completely pitiful.
Well, it's a joke, isn't it? It's a joke. And I think they tried to say that it was the paramedics in the ambulance or something to try and get out of it. But frankly, I mean, I have to say that there are not many crimes that I believe that should be punishable by a potential execution. But on this particular instance, I would say that. And because I don't want to spend money on these people in prison. I don't like the cut of their jib, and I don't see how you can see a beautiful child, they're innocent to the core, and then hurt that child, which results in the death, and then actually have the nerve to be even allowed to stand up and justify yourself. Once you've explained how it's happened and we know it's you, I think it's time to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, keep your thoughts coming.
Yes, please do. I'm sure you will have some strong views about that. So get in touch, GBViews at gbnews.uk.
Now, we move on because Boris Johnson is facing even more questions over allegations of Downing Street gatherings during lockdown. As it emerges, he may have personally attended a Prosecco party. You see, we're talking about child killers and things like this, then we need to discuss a Prosecco party. I mean, this is apparently after celebrating the sacking of the former aide Dominic Cummings, an event he previously denied ever took place.
Yes, well, despite many gatherings being currently investigated by the police, the Prime Minister remains adamant that he will not quit, while Daniel Kaczynski has been the Conservative MP for Shrewsbury and Atcham since 2005 and joins us now. I don't know if you just heard our conversation prior to us coming on to you, but we were talking about one of the serious issues going on in our country, which we'll actually be talking about later as well, which is the levels of child neglect and child abuse. And there are a host of serious issues happening in this country. Do you think the Prime Minister at this point is now just a massive distraction?
Well, I see you as the first ever Polish-born Member of Parliament, so our relations with key NATO allies in Central and Eastern Europe is critical from my interest perspective and many British people. The United Kingdom is seen a leader on our continent. And with rising tensions with Russia, the situation is becoming very grave. And that I'm pleased the Prime Minister was in Ukraine this week, showing leadership, and I think that he's doing a good job in that respect. With regards to the Partygate issue, look, I disagree with some of my Conservative MP colleagues who have castigated the Prime Minister. I really do believe that we need to listen to what changes he's going to make in number 10 Downing Street as a result of this investigation, and read the police report before we definitively any sort of announcements about his.
Daniel, we're struggling with your sound at the moment, so unfortunately we're going to have to leave it there. But thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Yes, sadly we have to drop that. We'll see what we can do about that. But moving on now to another item. A British woman was found guilty of making up a claim. She was gang raped at a holiday resort in Cyprus, but she's now had the case against her thrown out. The island's Supreme Court ruled that the 21-year-old did not get a fair trial 2 years ago after her defence team argued her confession came under duress.
Now, she originally received a 4-month suspended sentence for claiming that she was raped by up to 12 Israeli men in a hotel room in Ayia Napa. Michael Polak is the Justice Abroad, from Justice Abroad, said the verdict to have the case thrown out had been achieved against the odds.
Yes, well, Charlotte Gill is a barrister who specialises in violence against women, and she joins us now. Is it Jill or Gill? Sorry.
It's Charlotte Proudman, actually.
Oh, well, apologies for that. Charlotte, thank you for coming on to our show this morning. This is a sticky case, isn't it? Because she's had her case thrown out on the basis that she didn't get a fair trial. Can you just talk us through what you make of the court's decision?
Well, I absolutely welcome this court decision on behalf of all women who have gone through a very traumatic process of, well, first of all, having been raped, and then having gone to the police and told them very courageously and bravely, expected to be treated with fairness, expected to receive justice. And then after what she said was an unfair process during the investigation, she then retracted her allegations, as I understand. And as a result of that, and other issues, she was then prosecuted or seen to have falsified the allegations. So she was accused of lying about rape. And then when it went to trial, the first judge was accused of having treated her with absolute contempt. So treated her as a perpetrator rather than as being a victim or even just a complainant of rape. And then she was convicted of lying about rape. And then following further litigation, we now understand that that decision has been overturned by what I understand to be the Supreme Court in Cyprus, which is a fantastic decision, as I say, for all victims, but particularly this one, who will remain anonymous because she is a rape complainant. So while she has been vindicated as not lying about rape, What happens to the fact that she did allege that she had been gang raped by a number of Israeli men? What happens in terms of her seeking justice for the rape that she says she has suffered? What will happen with that investigation? I suspect very little. I certainly hope that there is a fair trial and a process in which she can make sure that her allegations are properly heard by the courts, and anyone that is found to have raped her is put behind bars.
Well, I mean, in the first instance, I mean, she was told, I mean, the judge kept saying that this is not a rape trial, which I think was totally wholly out of order. But weren't two of the alleged perpetrators, were they something to do with some Israeli official or something, and they were basically swiftly moved out of the country after the incident?
Yes, it seemed as if they were swiftly moved out of the country after the incident. But, you know, there are many things that you can say about the way in which the Israeli men left, the fact that they were not properly investigated by the police. But this is a police failure. This is a failure of the state of Cyprus for not properly investigating and then prosecuting her as if she is the perpetrator. And this is the problem. You see, it sends out a strong message, a very worrying message to other victims of rape who are already concerned about coming forward and reporting rape allegations because they feel they won't be treated properly, because they feel they'll be re-abused and re-traumatised by the process. And then on top of that, there's a risk that they could be the ones that are prosecuted for lying about rape, which is extraordinary. We should be showing these women compassion, empathy, understanding, making sure they have a fair trial, not locking them up potentially behind bars. And I must say, it's not just in Cyprus that this happens. This happens in our country as well. There is specific guidance from the CPS about prosecuting, supposedly, complainants of rape that have lied about rape. Well, how you can ever really be sure that someone has lied about rape, certainly in many cases where there is no CCTV evidence, no third-party evidence, etc., I don't know. And it seems to me to be driven by an ideological view that women lie about rape, or certainly some of them do. And yet we know from the statistics that only 3% of women lie about rape. Yet we don't see 97% of the accused locked up behind bars and found guilty of rape, do we? In fact, even getting a case to court in this country is next to impossible. 85,000 women are raped or sexually assaulted every year in this country, and yet only 1 of 77 rapes results in a charge. That's just a charge. And only in 1 year, there are only just over 1,000 convictions for rape. This really is the decriminalisation of rape. So first of all, perpetrators are not even being brought to justice. And then this case, along with very many others in this country, signals a move towards prosecuting and convicting rape complainants for apparently lying. It's absolutely extraordinary.
And in your view, what recourse legally now does this lady have? I mean, can she, will she get another trial? Will she be able to sue anybody for what's happened to her? I mean, what are her options going forward?
I don't know, because I'm not a lawyer in Cyprus, and I don't know what her options are in that country. I would hope that the police would open an investigation into her original rape complaints, if of course that's what she wants, and it's victim focused and driven by her wishes, and then those Israeli men will be properly investigated and then potentially put on trial for rape, and would have to give evidence in a court of law, and would either be found guilty or not guilty. Or she may wish to bring a civil case for damages against these Israeli men. That might be a possibility that's open to her, and no doubt one that she will have explored or will be exploring with lawyers, which would mean that in a civil court a case is brought against them. If the court finds that in fact she was raped, it doesn't mean that they will go to prison.
We've just lost you, Charlotte. That's Dr. Charlotte Brown, a barrister who specialises in violence against women, and Charlotte is a gender-based violence expert for the European Institute for Gender Equality.
Yes, well, after the break, we'll be giving you the latest from Westminster, including the tax that you're facing for the government's pandemic mistakes. Stay with us for that, but first, the weather.
Hello again. There will be some bright spells, even some sunshine, mainly to the east of higher ground, but most places are cloudy today, and it will be damp in the northwest, western Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England, because a warm front is moving through. It's pushing northeast, and within this warm front, areas of cloud and rain arrive from the Atlantic, but also relatively mild air coming in from the west. Having said that, it is fairly chilly for the Northern Isles ahead of the warm front, and there'll be a few showers at first here before more persistent rain and drizzle arrives later, and it stays damp for western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, as well as northwest England and North Wales, particularly over higher ground. But there will be cloud breaks to the east of Wales, across southeast England and eastern England, and where we get some cloud breaks, 13 or even 14 Celsius is possible, so really quite mild for the time of year. And then this cloudy and damp zone spreads across the whole of the country overnight. So the cloud breaks tending to fill in somewhat, and because of the cloud and an increased breeze, well, it's going to be frost-free for everyone. Temperatures most places staying up at 7 or 8 Celsius. A mild start then to Thursday, but a dull and dreary start for many. Some persistent rain around western hills and coasts. But again, some cloud breaks will develop, especially for the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast, and feeling pleasant enough where that happens. But the breeze will pick up through the day. Gales in the north and west of Scotland, and some heavy rain arriving here later as temperatures drop away significantly behind this area of rain. This is a cold front, and it's going to spread its way southeastwards on Thursday night. Snow above 300 metres for Scotland as the cold front pushes through, and also for the Pennines, and some really quite lively winds associated with it, so gales around coasts and hills. Once that front clears through, colder air for Friday, mixture of sunny spells and showers, turning cloudy with rain in the north on Saturday.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panelists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel, they're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
Well, it's just gone 10:11:29, and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Muroki, and Nana Akweer. We're live on your TV and radio and online this morning.
Now, despite the harrowing cases of Arthur Lebin-Hughes and Star Hobson making the front pages last year, there are still 669 child protection referrals made by the police to social services every day between 2020 and 21.
Yes, not only this, but the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse said there was a, quote, flawed assumption that child sexual exploitation was on the wane amongst councils and police forces. And they say this has led to extreme failures in the way it's tackled.
Marilyn Hawes is the CEO and founder of Freedom from Abuse and joins us now. Marilyn, thank you so much. I mean, Marilyn, it feels like this is a worrying trend of lots of children who are beautiful and lovely and innocent being killed at the hands of parents or, you know, and then no one seems to be noticing it, or if they do notice it, nothing happens. What in your mind is going on? What's going wrong?
Well, the whole system is flawed. The whole system is not fit for purpose. It's not. I mean, yesterday when this came out from the ICSA inquiry, did you see anybody from government outraged? Well, we still bang on about the wrongness of Boris Johnson, which is one thing to be discussed. But when you're talking about the killing of children and exploitation of them, and Mercy put it so well 15 minutes ago with her synopsis. Well done on that, Mercy. But I despair. I mean, I do believe in this country children's lives are just cheap. There's no real credence given to it. I mean, how can the sloppiness of some police officers is outrageous. I think the respect for the police is at an all-time low. And I think it has to be something to do with their recruitment. It has something to do with the lack of officers, because we lost so many, 20,000 we lost, didn't we, some years ago. It's the poor training, and it's just sloppy. I mean, how can you, when you've got a child who's been raped, a 12-year-old standing in front of you at the police counter, ignore it? How can you make, and I quote here, incomplete evidence, no data kept on the ethnicity of the perpetrators. So you can't actually do an analysis of, is it certain cultures? Is it across all cultures? Social workers lacking empathy. The Department of Education, the recommendation from ICSA, and I have to say Alexis J has done a brilliant job through ICSA. They want to ban these semi-independent settings and independent settings for 16 and 17-year-olds, which should happen because there's no overview there. They're just left to their own devices. And as with all perpetrators of abuse, they smell vulnerability. They know exactly where these kids are hanging out and who to target. But then again, the inquiry has stated that England and Welsh police and everybody must collect specific data. But then when you look, because I went all through the 198 pages yesterday, not so many years ago, the police said to one girl that this girl of 12, 13 years old was bringing about a bad society, walking around acting like a prostitute. Oh, how helpful. And then there was a care home staff who actually helped a young girl choose an outfit for her date with a 30-year-old man. Now, you know, don't tell me care homes don't have perpetrators in them. Was this person on the make? Was she helping provide that child into the hands of an abuser? It's just extraordinary. And another one, that a child came home having been exploited and raped, and the care home staff worker, when this little girl was crying, said she was seeking attention. Now, I just despair. It breaks my heart. I am never immune to this. These children in exploitation, you have child sexual abuse is horrendous, and exploitation is something different again. And I don't think the police understand, and I know schools don't, that the hook, very often it can be, and not always, but it can be someone their own age who has targeted a child in a park.
Well, Marilyn, Marilyn, it seems to be just a lack of joined-up thinking. Listen, thank you so much.
Absolutely right.
Thank you so much for your views, and I agree with you, Mercy. Your monologue was sensational.
Thank you.
Right, so that's Marilyn Hawes. She's the CEO and founder of Freedom from Abuse.
Yes, well, after the break, our home and security editor Mark White recaps Boris's trip to Ukraine yesterday. But first, here's your headlines.
Good morning, it's 11:33. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. The Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove says people in the North and Midlands have been overlooked and undervalued by politicians for years. The government is now publishing its election pledge plans to level up the country, aiming to reduce the gap between poor and rich areas. Labour, those criticised the policy, accusing the government of using recycled pots of money. Manchester United footballer Mason Greenwood has been released on bail pending further investigation. The 20-year-old was first arrested on Sunday on suspicion of rape and assault of a young woman after social media images and videos were posted online. On Tuesday, he was further arrested on suspicion of sexual assault and threats to kill. The Home Secretary says there's been a failure of leadership in some parts of the Metropolitan Police. Priti Patel was speaking after the Independent Office for Police Conduct found evidence of bullying, racism and misogyny in the force. She told the Home Affairs Committee there are problems within the culture of the Met. Russia has told the US to stop whipping up tensions in Europe. Ahead of a planned call with Boris Johnson this afternoon, President Vladimir Putin accused the West of trying to lure it into war with Ukraine. Russia has mobilised more than 100,000 troops on its border with Ukraine over recent weeks. Western countries say any invasion will incur heavy sanctions. A charity and a union representing Border Force officers are seeking a High Court injunction to prevent migrant boats from being pushed back towards France. Lawyers for the Public and Commercial Services Union and Care for Calais will argue the Home Office should suspend the policy because it contravenes international law. You're now up to date on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. There'll be a short break and then we'll be back to the point.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good morning. If you just tuned in, this is To The Point with me, Nana Akwe and Mercy Muroki. Now, as Boris touched down in Ukraine yesterday, Russian President Vladimir Putin accused the United States of forcing his country into war as tensions along the Ukrainian border continue to grow. GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White has more.
At key locations along the Ukrainian border, Russian forces continue to mass. Despite international alarm, Moscow says it has no intention of invading its neighbour. But nor does it say when these large-scale military exercises will end. The manoeuvres have sparked intense diplomatic efforts to ease the tensions with Russia, which Western governments fear will end in conflict. But in a clear warning to Moscow, the British Prime Minister flew into the Ukrainian capital to emphasise the UK's support for Kiev.
Today, I've announced a further £88 million of UK funding to support good governance and energy independence in Ukraine. Alongside other countries, we are also preparing a package of sanctions and other measures to be enacted the moment the first Russian tow cap crosses further into Ukrainian territory.
As well as tens of millions of pounds in additional aid, the UK has stepped up support for the Ukrainian military, with new missile systems and dozens of British personnel training the Ukrainians in their use. In eastern Ukraine, this soldier, a gas drilling specialist in civilian life, has spent 7 years fighting Russian separatists here. He says his comrades are ready to defend their homeland, and any large-scale move by Moscow will cost them dearly.
If they start a military operation here, it will be like Stalingrad for them. We will ensure they're bogged down right across Ukraine.
Ukrainian concerns over Russian aggression are understandable. In 2014, Russian forces entered Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula, annexing that region, which is now mostly under Moscow's control. And for years now, in parts of eastern Ukraine, thousands have died as Russian-backed separatists continue to mount a protracted insurgency against Ukrainian forces. Since late last year, there has been a steady build-up of Russian forces along its Ukrainian border, now believed to be in the region of 110,000. A further 30,000 Russian troops are massing on the Belarusian-Ukrainian border to take part in a huge military exercise there. The US and the UK are among the nations planning to help bolster the defences of their allies in the region, like here in Estonia, where American and Belgian jets have been patrolling the airspace here. While over in the Black Sea, Russian naval assets are also massing. These are exercises for now, but manoeuvres with menace. And although the diplomacy continues apace, with brinkmanship, bloodshed is only ever a misstep away. Mark White, GB News.
Mark White, of course, our affairs editor, Home Affairs.
Yes, well, Boris Johnson has jetted back from Ukraine in time for Prime Minister's questions later this afternoon. But what kind of questions and pressure is he likely to face? Well, joining us now from Westminster is our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Tom, another big day for the Prime Minister. I feel like we've said this multiple times over the last couple of weeks, but what can we expect from today's questions?
It certainly is a big day, and yes, we have been saying that really since the start of the year, but it does feel like now is the moment for Boris Johnson to get the conversation moving on past the last month of Partygate reports. This will be the first Prime Minister's questions after the publication of that stripped-down Sue Gray report we all read on Monday. And of course, the Prime Minister, as you rightly said, has been in Kiev. He's been trying his hand at being a world leader, at trying to stand on the world stage and look beyond the nitty-gritty of Westminster. But also, a very seismic thing is happening later on in the Commons, the publication of the Levelling Up White Paper, the big mission of this government. Will the conversation stick on that? Or how many questions will we hear yet again about Partygate? It will be a fascinating watch from 12 p.m. today, live in the House of Commons, which of course we can see on GB News.
Well, Tom, thank you for that. And yes, of course, we will be bringing our viewers that live Prime Minister's questions a bit later on, not long to go now. But let's finish off the show with your views. Lots of views getting in touch. As you can see, me and Nana are shifting through lots of papers.
Well, I've got some great ones with you and your monologue. Mercy talked about the ludicrous sentences for child killers. David's been in touch. He said, just execute the killers. Best comment I've heard in years. Well said, girls.
That's your position, isn't it?
Yeah, that was mine, yes. You never said that, actually. Let's see. But lots of them have been saying that they love it. Well done, girls. I couldn't understand how this couple were meant to be caring for this little baby. So it's got so little sentences and no one has commented on it. Agree with everything you've said, Mercy. Is this how much babies' lives are valued? Sickening.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to hear from somebody who doesn't agree with me almost, but I mean, if somebody didn't agree with the fact that we need to lock up, at the very least, lock them up for life, child killers, I'd question their morals.
How could they disagree with you, Mercy? Yeah. You are the font of all knowledge.
Oh, no, we'll go that far. We'll go that far. Somebody here says the population of the UK are right behind what you said. The justice system needs a big overhaul. Killing anyone, let alone a young infant, should mean life. Life till the culprit is dead. So a whole life order there. That's from Kev in Crewe.
Well, we also talked about the PPE waste. The government wasting a fortune, aren't they? And Mel says just hindsight is a wonderful thing. I mean, imagine the furore if the government had said that we were purchasing PPE, but then it would go through the tendering process, testing procedures, because being signed off by auditors and good value whilst hundreds are dying. I mean, you know, I sort of get what they're saying, but, you know.
Well, Nana's monologue a bit earlier on, I think I was about 2 hours ago now, was on about net zero, weren't you? You don't agree with the net zero agenda.
Well, it's a nice idea.
Yeah, in theory, but in practice. Well, somebody who is JD, just JD here, says... Nana speaking on climate change is using a common sense view, which is supported by the majority of people in the UK. And he says, or she, you've become one of their favourite presenters to listen to.
Thanks, Mercy.
And also, just to finish off, Wayne says he absolutely agrees with you. Net zero, with the net zero aspirations. And the fact, if Britain achieves this, it will only contribute in terms of the 1%. So, because China and India continue to march forward. Wow. So, range of views there. Thank you so much for getting in touch. That is it from us here, though, from To The Point. But don't go away, because up next is Prime Minister's Questions on The Briefing with Gloria De Piero. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Hello again. There will be some bright spells, even some sunshine, mainly to the east of higher ground, but most places are cloudy today, and it will be damp in the northwest, western Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England. Because a warm front is moving through, it's pushing northeast, and within this warm front, areas of cloud and rain arrive from the Atlantic, but also relatively mild air coming in from the west. Having said that, it is fairly chilly for the Northern Isles ahead of the warm front, and there'll be a few showers at first here before more persistent rain and drizzle arrives later, and it stays damp for western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, as well as northwest England and North Wales, particularly over higher ground. But there will be cloud breaks to the east of Wales, across southeast England and eastern England, and where we get some cloud breaks, 13 or even 14 Celsius is possible, so really quite mild for the time of year. And then this cloudy and damp zone spreads across the whole of the country overnight. So the cloud breaks tending to fill in somewhat, and because of the cloud and an increased breeze, well, it's going to be frost-free